Over the summer, can you hear me okay in the back?
I don't know if it's on.
I did unmute it. I'll try it again. Can you hear me in the back now? Unmuted?
It's off. Turn off. Turn off.
Now we'll try talking. I hear me. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Thank goodness for people who do AV, behind the scenes work. It makes all the difference. Thank you. It was summertime and we're going ahead and planning the school music for the next year. So we wanted to collate a list of all the songs we had done the year before. It was a clunky software system, so Sarah on our staff would boot up a page. I would dictate the songs into my phone from that day, and then she'd boot up the next one. So we came across the lovely song, "The Lord is Kind and Merciful," and I'm dictating it, and Siri changed one word, and the word "of," and it made me laugh out loud when I read the new translation, "The Lord is kind." Fortunately, the Lord is more than kind of merciful, and at the same time, fortunately, life is, though hard, often funny. Thank you for the welcome, the introduction, for coming. I know I'm with a lot of good people, and I'm honored to have this time with you. Here's what we'll do during this time. I'm first going to say 5 things that I won't be talking about, although these would be fascinating. There's a thing that I think is catching on around the country called Christian roulette. You might not be able to read these words, so I'll summarize it. You open the Bible in a random page. 2, follow exactly what is written. 3, last one to jail wins. Okay. If you read through the Old Testament, you would get that, right? Okay. Nor will we talk about why every church needs young people on their staff. This is truly a series of banners somebody had outside their institution. Just saying. There are some great questions for conversation starters. I'm not going to share my favorites, such as this. Give people a chance to talk about themselves, right? Okay, there you have it. Okay, and I don't know why this is so random, but how to hone your skills. Anybody here work in the restaurant industry? How to hone your skills in this industry? How do you prepare the chicken? We just tell them straight out that they're going to die. Or 5, I'm not going to talk about how I personally prepared for this presentation. Isn't that just the best picture ever? Okay, anyway. Okay, so none of that. Okay, so instead, here's what we'll do during this time. I'm going to begin with a personal story to set the stage. There are 6 sections we're going to cover a lot. I'll try to keep it moving. You don't need to write these down. I'll just flip through them really quickly so you can see them. We'll talk about, oops, wrong thing, wrong button. Am I turning the whole thing off? What forgiveness is not. Don't you dare forgive unless. Bitter or better, the spirituality question. So how, for crying out loud, right? I subtitled this, Stumbling My Way Towards Forgiveness. A prayer for survivors of abuse I call I Have Great Worth and Goodness. And then between 5 and 6, I'm going to talk about a few things that will make sense when we get there. It will include a question and answer, a few words in advance of the sacrament of reconciliation, and something else which escapes me right now. I'll know when we get there. And then there'll be a guided prayer experience then. That's what it was. So it really is my heartfelt prayer that, the choice is the final section. Good. It is my heartfelt prayer that there's something for you tonight. I actually is my gut belief that for each person that there is something here that God might have wanted you to hear through me, in spite of me, but I count on you as best as you can to listen for what God might have for you. So let's dig in. I'll begin by way of a personal story. In 1989, I got a call from the Archbishop that I was going to become the associate pastor at Our Lady Queen of Peace in House Springs. I called a priest buddy of mine, some of you know him, Father Don Wester, who was the associate there, head of meeting. I said, Don, tell me what I should know. He said, the pastor is really struggling, things are not going well, and some months after I got there, out of the blue, the pastor just walked away. All right, the new pastor came. I had not met him before, and to this day, I don't know why he consistently lied about me or needed people to hate me. People on the staff, people in the parish who were so grateful for me, suddenly grew suspicious. I'd walk in when he was talking to the secretary with his back behind me, making up something. I said, Don, that's a lie. You know it's not true. He said, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't do that. Nor do I know why he kept changing the locks in the rectory so I had less and less access to my own living quarters. And I finally, it was when I am perhaps like your priest. Occasionally I get there at the last second. And I had been jogging and I was going, oh man, I really cut it close for confession. So I decided to just jump over the back fence. I was going to save a few minutes before running out of the front door. And I came across in the glass window there. I saw him pull, he cooked for himself, a gourmet cook. When I saw him pull my container out of the food and spit in it and put it back in there, that I realized I would probably have to leave. Before I could do anything with that, I got a phone call that night from a woman in the parish who said that while inebriated, he had put his hand on the pants of a 13-year-old boy at a gathering they had had that weekend. So this was before 2002. We didn't really have good systems with which to deal with all of this. So I wrote a letter to the Archbishop. I drove it down to the cathedral, what that thing is called, the roundhouse, whatever, and late at night. And you know how you have some things that kind of visuals that stick in your brain? So I'm tired, and I got this letter, and I know it's important, and I couldn't find the mail slot on that round building there. And I finally found it was down on the ground, so I reached down to slide it through there, and somebody pulled it out from the other side. Oh my gosh, it was a night guard. Okay, I didn't see the person. I was very awake on the way home. Anyway, but I'll never forget the odd yellow lights of Lindell Boulevard then. I say that only because I would imagine that for each of us, in some moments, there's just something about that visually, or how it smelled, or tasted, or sounded, or looked, that stay with us. The Archbishop called and said, don't say anything, but I want to do an investigation. That weekend he announced at all the masses that he would be leaving. To his circle of power in the parish, he said that I had finally won. I had accused him of having an affair with the secretary. He was going to have to leave. He couldn't take it anymore. As an aside, I'm giving out communion that weekend, and I'm giving the cup. And I handed the cup to this woman who must have seen the anguish in my face. And I'll not forget, when she gave me the cup back, she put her hands around mine, and there was kindness in her face. I'll never forget that. Meanwhile, in between masses, grown men bigger than me, I can still see the veins in their necks sticking out with their fingers this close to my chest. We know what you did to that man. Last mass over, I closed the rectory door. I leaned against it in the back, trying not to shake. I don't know how long I was standing there when the doorbell rang. Do I get it or not? I didn't know. I opened the door, and it was a woman to show me a picture of her son who had 4 fingerprint marks right here on the side of his face, saying that the pastor had hit her child in the sacristy. Evidently, that would be something he did. The doorbell rang again with somebody else with some horror story about their kid. I just wanted to scream or cry or go away. That was until someone said, I think you just need to forgive. That's when I wanted to scream. Yeah. No, I did not just need to forgive. What did that even mean? That statement unintentionally it felt like violence because it was a violent kind of thing to say, no, I did not need to forgive. No one has to tell you how you've been wronged. It might be this one thing that just happened again and again and again. It could be something big. Maybe just hearing that person's name gives you a pit in your stomach. Perhaps your anger wakes you in the middle of the night. Often enough, we relive that scene, right? Sometimes we get mad at ourselves for what we wished we had said. And that keeps us awake, right? We wonder which parts are our own fault. Maybe the hurt is shoved in our face with every holiday, or perhaps with each breath we take. And there is often a part of us which does not want to forget it. I get that part. And sometimes a part of us, when we try to forgive, shove it way down, we can't. It still bubbles up. Our bodies, of course, carry the effects of these hurts. I mean, there's plenty of science to show the negative consequences of trauma on anger to our health when we're aware of it and when we're not. And what we do with our pain, I think, is one of the things that most defines the kind of people we will be and the kind of lives that we will have. So what do we do with all of it? I mean, perhaps it's almost easier to say what we don't do. One of the first things we don't do is to tell ourselves we're not affected when we are. One of the things I'm very aware of about grief is this sentence, I don't know where it came to me from somebody, what we don't deal with will deal with us. A friend of mine once told me, I hated my uncle. He was a sexual molester. My grandmother kept him at bay, but the damage was done. Once I heard myself say, she's very vivid, I wouldn't care if a train hit him and drug him for miles down the track. I might even cheer it on. She said, my spiritual director told me that perhaps I should work on forgiveness. My thought for her, I said, yeah, but maybe not yet. Though I want her to know the freedom that comes from forgiveness, we are often much too glib about what it means. We're often much too glib. That's my preface. We'll dig in. 1, what forgiveness is not. On November 18th, 2018, Jackie Schmidt was shot to death at Catholic Supply. You might have heard that story in the news. Mom and Dad are parishioners at our parish. We just try to love them through that. When they caught the man who murdered his daughter, Bob told me, I'm really relieved, Father Joe. Yeah, tell me more. He goes, now I know that my boys can't get at him, because if they did, they'd kill him, and then I'd lose my sons as well. And he said this phenomenal thing. This good man. He goes, I don't expect them to forgive that man. I'm just working with them to help them transition to something more positive. I'll say that again. I don't expect them to forgive that man. I'm just working with them to help them transition to something more positive. That's it. I think that's it. It's a clumsy phrase, but the word forgiveness, in my estimation, is almost useless to us at this point because it's laden with so many levels of misunderstanding. It's almost like the word God. What does that even mean? What does love mean, right? So I'm beating this to death, but I love that. I'm working with them to help them transition to something more positive. I will tell you, when they did the victim witness statement, he told me in the parking lot in between masses, I caught him, I heard about it on the news, and I couldn't stop crying as I went in to start the next mass. I wish we had a different word, because here's one of the big misunderstandings. I think for us, forgiveness we think means acting like no wrong was done. If you think that's what forgiveness is, don't do it. It's not acting like no wrong was done. Or we think we're somehow condoning that behavior. No, we're not. Intentional or unintentional, even sometimes, the harm is real. A different misunderstanding about forgiveness is we think we have to remain in an abusive situation where we will be wronged again and again. Please no. One of the things that hurts my heart deeply, back up, not many things make me mad unless someone uses their power over somebody else. Then I want to throw myself in between them. But one of the things that people who are abusive sometimes do is, where's your Christianity, Miss Goody Two-Shoes? Aren't you going to forgive me? To keep that person under their power. No, forgiveness sometimes means we have to set boundaries and we have to step away. I could go on and on with some of these things, so bear with me when you see me get all passionate. Stop talking for a second, okay? Like faith, forgiveness does not mean we throw away our ability to think critically, nor do we stop the work of detachment and boundaries when they are needed. Anger is our ally. We grew up in my family being shamed for anger. Anger is a dangerous emotion, but it can help us do what we need to do. I would tell you that my anger is what helped, in part, me go to the bishop and stand up to what I needed to stand up to make sure less people were hurt by that guy. Next, it is a delusion to, this is the next misunderstanding, a delusion to think that revenge will help. It does not. It just does not. It's a false light. There's just like no life there, like any temptation. If you allow me, 2 comic strips on the topic of revenge. So I like things that make me laugh. Before I go to bed, I read the comic strips because it helps me shift gears. My favorite, I'm curious how many are familiar with this, called Pearls Before Swine. Yeah. If you don't know, it is this dark, sarcastic rat, this sweet, innocent, gullible pig, these dumb as rock crocodiles, this intelligent goat. Every so often, other characters walk in from time to time. In this one, Father Gus appears. Hey, Father Gus, how can I be at peace with the world? Well, the first step is to forgive those who have wronged you. Even write it down if it helps. Now, I'm going to say a little bit about that later, about writing it down. Here's rat writing. To those who have wronged me, I forgive you. But just so we're even, let me punch you in the face. He explains, he goes, oh, so close. He goes, vengeance helps me forgive. Okay. No, it does not. It does not. Here's another look at that topic. All right. Here's rat talking to pig. I've decided to find all my enemies and tell them I forgive them. Good for you, rat. Why did you decide to do that? Sorry, I'm laughing because I know the third panel. Okay. To give my vengeance the element of surprise. We could do that all night. Yeah. Could you quit talking and just have more comic strips? All right. The death penalty is perhaps the most extreme example of our desire for revenge. It's been shown that it does not, it's not a deterrent. It's more an attempt for us to get a sense of satisfaction. I listened to a series on the radio once where they were interviewing people who had witnessed the execution of someone who murdered their kids or whatever. One of the most common, almost universal reactions was, what was it like for you? It wasn't enough. And they wanted to see it again and again, and they wish it was slower. Again, revenge is a false light. So I'll go back to my opening personal story to end part 1. And here's a thought about confession. So I decided, maybe as a year-ish, I don't know how long after that priest went to jail. By the way, I'm not a fan of our penal system, which I think is mostly punitive, not rehabilitative. But in this case, I was glad because he couldn't hurt anybody. He couldn't hurt me. I decided I would bring whatever was sinful about that to the sacrament of reconciliation. I liked my wording. Well, the second part of my wording. I said, for whatever was sinful about my anger, I am sorry. It's a good phrase. For whatever is sinful about that. Because we can sometimes tie ourselves in knots how much of that was or wasn't. I figured that God would fill it out. Figure that out. I read it. So for whatever is sinful about my anger, I'm sorry. And then I added really quick, but I'm not sorry for most of it. And nor should I have been. Because I said, that helped me do what was needed to be done. That's part one. Part two, and for those who are panicked, they get shorter. Remember, we had the preface also. Okay. Part two is unless. Pretty many years ago now, maybe 15, I buried, a man I know had buried his daughter, the victim of a drunk driver who swerved into her lane. You know, I tend to check in on people after they buried a loved one, so several weeks later I just asked him what it was like for him to try to go through his days after his daughter had been taken from him in such a senseless act. He talked about how food tasted like sawdust, how it broke his heart to watch other family members grieve, how hard it was to watch the rest of the world go on like nothing happened. I mean, anybody who's buried a loved one, you get it. At one point he said, this all seems like a dream, and I can hardly imagine my life without her. He put his head down for a while, and it was quiet. I didn't know what he was thinking. He looks up at me and says, I will have anger, but I will not have hatred. And he says, if I have hatred in my heart, that senseless act of violence claims another victim. He didn't want to give that person that much power. That's a profound truth this heartbroken man knew. There's a price to pay for not forgiving. And Jesus knows we have all been wronged. Hate to say we're not done being wronged either, in small ways or big ways. As I said, what we do with that is one of the things that will, more than almost anything else, other than things like the practice of gratitude in the present moment, but one of the things that will most help determine the kinds of people we are. Most simply, forgiveness is not optional for those who want a joy-filled, meaningful life. It's not optional. To not forgive has been well described, and maybe you've heard this phrase. It's like drinking rat poison and waiting for the rat to die. Rat's going to be just fine, right? Or, as Buddy Hackett put it, while you're out carrying a grudge, the other guy's out dancing. Or as Pearls Before Swine put it, here's goat talking to rat. Can you see rat's face there? He's not in a happy place. What are you doing, rat? Pig ticked me off this morning, so I'm holding a grudge as a means of getting him back. Okay, we're going to see pig in this next slide. You're really affecting him. Ha ha ha, take that, you stupid pig. Okay. We could try revenge, repression, resentment, but only forgiveness breaks us open to a life of forgiveness. And so, as Father Gary pointed out, but both through his life and even to his death, Jesus proclaimed that forgiveness is the path to life. Here's a sentence. When we forgive, we are not losing. We are setting ourselves free. When we forgive, we are not losing. We are setting ourselves free. Okay, pause one. I ask you to please think for a moment. Scribble a note if you want. Make a mental note in your head. Please give me 20 seconds of silence for this, for people who, unlike extroverts like me, actually think before they speak. Okay. What's one thing you would want to remember so far for your life, even if it is never let somebody talk you into going to a talk I'm giving in the future, whatever. Okay, but 20 seconds, just think of something. What's one thing that you would like to remember so far, if anything? 17, 16. You could staple it to my forehead. If you don't mind for just a minute, if you would turn to someone near you, you don't have to. If you don't know them, introduce yourself, tell them your name, and just what's one thing you'd like to remember so far, and maybe why. We will have a total of 76 seconds for this. Go. Okay, I'm gonna give you more. 1 minute and 12. Go. Make sure the other person gets to talk too. 30 more seconds. Make sure the other person gets to talk too. 30 more seconds. Eight, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, thank you for doing that. You know, when you try to get I steadfastly resist this approach to getting a group of people who are talking to get quiet. I've seen people make the sign of the cross. It works, but it just somehow doesn't seem right to me. I don't know what that is. I will stand over here. There's a few people in this front pew that are kind of cause weird radiation in this world. Better over here. You guys fight it out amongst yourselves who that might be. Okay. Bitter or better? A friend of mine had been beaten by her dad as a child, and because the beatings would most often happen at night, in her adult years, she would find herself having trouble falling asleep. And now she knew well that Jesus said we need to be people who forgive. And as a person of integrity, she wanted to do that, but she wondered what it meant in her situation, or whether or not she was even capable of it. Someone told her, the fact that you desire to forgive him is enough. God will work through the rest. Your desire is what will allow it to happen. And those words alone seem to lift the burden and give her the peace that trust and healing would eventually come. How do we forgive? The first step is to have what my friend had in her heart. Her desire to forgive would make all the difference. Secondly, no one can do it all by themselves, and no one has to. And I'll speak more concretely about this in a minute. But really, it was her openness, I think, that what made it most possible. I might have this later in my notes, but I can't not say it now. I remember at a tough time in my life once, feeling like it was impossible when I read something or listened to a talk from Richard Rohr who said, notice that the scriptures say Jesus was raised from the dead. They don't say he raised himself. There's very comfort in that. Jesus was raised. We do what we can, but Jesus does the work. Now, there's a version of the poem called It's rubbing on my manly chest hairs, I'm sure. All three of them. Okay, there is an old poem that addressed this. Some of you might know. I'm curious, how many people remember that old poem, Footprints in the Sand? Okay, good. There's a modern version of that which I appreciate. It goes like this. First panel, my child, I never left you. Those places with one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. In this version, that long groove over there is when I dragged you for a while. Probably like that sometimes, right? Okay. So anyway, so I first found that years ago. Then recently, somebody added another iteration, which I kind of get a kick out of. It says, one time I hid you in that little sand hole while I got a hot dog. If you've got that poem on your wall, good luck looking at that again. Okay. Although maybe it does sometimes feel like we've been abandoned along the way a bit, right? Now, the ways we have been mistreated leave us with the choice, which is the title of this segment, bitter or better. Spirituality has been described as that which allows us to move from one to the other. There's always a moment between stimulus and response, right? Between that memory or that person and what we do next, how we feel, what we do. Spirituality helps us lengthen that a little bit. She comes around the corner and I don't have to scream. I exaggerate, but and all the work we do with spirituality is really, I think, to help create a bigger spaciousness, right? And all the work that we do to become more alive and free will help us be ready to do the work of forgiveness when it is needed, and it is almost always needed. There's a Native American statement. It's articulated differently by different tribes. I've heard it attributed to the Cherokee tribe that says it this way: there lives inside each person an eagle and a snake. Now in this version, the snakes would be the poisonous ones, although they all have their place in the ecosystem, and I love it all. I do. But they said, there lives inside each person an eagle and a snake. We become the one we feed the most. It's really true. The more we choose bitterness, the more we become a bitter person. And if you and I want to walk around and find stuff to complain about every day, we can find it because there's lots. There is. And if you and I work to find things for which to be grateful, there are even more in the end, if we look for them. All in the big scheme of things, because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, there's ultimately more reason for joy than not. Jesus never promised life will be easy. And the good and the bad, they just don't cancel out. You know this, life is both and, it's not either or. And we are wise to choose to look intentionally at our blessings along the way. I apologize for how glib this sounds, but it's been said, if you really want to be happy, no one can stop you. I know the harm people cause to us can be devastating. And this path can be so difficult. But in the end, it's worth it. So how already? Because We're all so different. I look out, as Gary said, there's like maybe 3, maybe 4 nice people here. So we got a little bit of a... Yeah, oh, he seemed to be thinking it. I could just kind of tell, yeah. Well, because we're so different, what will help each of us is also very different. But for me, the first step is becoming aware of the mixture of emotions I feel. Becoming aware without shaming ourselves is the first step. My spiritual director once said this to me, and I've never forgotten it. It's true. In this, he said something. In the spiritual world, awareness is everything. There it is. A man in the confessional recently said, yeah, I get so mad. I go, good, there you go. Being aware of that, name it, don't shame it. And he goes, I feel so mad at myself. Good, name it. Now, awareness. Secondly, now not everybody is like me, but I know that if I can do this, it's much easier for me to let go of my angers over time if I know that if I've been able to say what I need to say to the person. Now, I don't always get that opportunity, and don't do it if it's not safe. But somehow being able to say it out loud helps me. This doesn't usually happen, but it really would help should the person then grovel. I would love that. It's not always possible, of course, or advisable to try to speak face to face to the person. When I do, I work hard to prepare what I want to say. My goal is not to shame them, but to bring myself honestly so they can see, and in the hopes that God might have something for them or for me to hear through that conversation. We got to take a little care about it. This just pops into my brain. Anybody remember the comedian Steve Martin? Yeah. You know, when these little things pop in my brain, perhaps it's better I don't say them. But anyway, we go anyway. He said, yes, I used to be a cheerleader, but I had to quit because the other cheerleaders were so jealous because I would come up with all these great cheers like, die you gravy-sucking pigs. So you might want to work on that. Not exactly that, yeah. But again, we then just draw on the gift of faith and the wisdoms that have been passed down over the generations. It's often good to have others that are safe, not be like a trusted confidant, a counselor, that we can deal with this. It does not help to try to get other people to hate that person also. That's just feeding the beast. So here's the process, again, in a story from my own personal life. I will change the gender of this person or not. So you have to guess. So I was in a parish once, and one lay volunteer was given a confidential peer listening role. Turns out the person was unable to keep confidence, and that's a very dangerous thing. So the co-leader and I practiced what we would say, and we worked hard on this. We met with her, celebrated her gifts, explained why, though we've tried on that, it's going to be not working, so here's a different ministry for you. That worked, we thought, till the next morning when it became clear that this woman had decided she would make my life hell as best as she could. And she was very public about it. Things like, when I would walk up to say Mass, storm out of the church and crying and sit in the back and say, I can't tell you what that man did to me. That's great. One thing that kind of made me laugh was when she couldn't get out the pew, then sometimes she would put her missal over her face like this. I guess that helped. Anyway, it didn't really hurt me, but anyway, it's just interesting. So that went on for a year. And so I am... Then a year later, she decided, it was all good now, we'll be friends. So not going so well for me. We're back at church after math one day, and my co-worker said, how's it going for you? I said, I can't shake this. And she said this. Now, I've never worked a 12-step program, but I get it. She goes, I think you need to admit that you are powerless over your anger. So I thought there was a truth to that. So here's the process I developed. You might find this helpful. So I opened a Word document, and I put it all in there. And I love this. When I do this now, I always have to make sure the fonts are good. I like good fonts. And then I would go back and add more things to it and just get it so it's all there. So then I decided I'm going to need God's help. So I printed it out, and I took it out in the backyard, and maybe this is a guy thing, but I lit it on fire and surrendered it to God with a prayer. I can tell you with absolute clarity, that helped me for exactly 7 minutes. And I was all mad again. I thought of more stuff. So I said, see, God, I can't do this myself. You're going to have to help me. That's why I didn't light it all over again. Save paper. And but I decided to surrender it again, which helped me for 11 minutes. And there it was. And that's what I did for months, year, two, I don't know. I just remember one day having this sense that I would be happy to walk arm in arm with her into the kingdom of heaven. I would. I really meant it. Now, if she called and said, let's go get a beer on a Friday night, I ain't going. Yeah. Nor should I have to want to. But she had no more power over me. I do know many people find it helpful to write it out, save it somewhere, go back and add it, because there's this seemingly process of trying to help ourselves, but it keeps circulating in our brains. Talk to the brilliant counselors up here. But there's sometimes for me, having it out there really helps. There are other things that might help you. And too bad I don't have any of them. That's it. So here is my summary then of the 3 steps of forgiveness. 1, I should have put these in a PowerPoint, sorry. I was too busy putting slides, comic strips. 1, we make an act of the will and we choose it. 2, we surrender it to God. And 3, we do steps 1 and 2 again and again and again. When Jesus said to Peter, forgive your enemies 70 times, 7 times, I don't necessarily think it's that many different offenses. It's the same one bothers him again every time he thinks about it often enough. It's not a one and done. Again, what helps you? You guys, there's all kinds of resources out there. 12-step programs, spiritual director, whatever. The transitioning to something more positive is ongoing and messy, and it's one of those things that could seem almost impossible, but I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen it with my own eyes. At my last parish at Assumption in O'Fallon, I led the funeral services for a young man named Sean Reeser. Everybody loves Sean. This outgoing kid went through our grade school, involved in a youth group. The girls would go to Sean for fashion advice. Okay, no one's ever come to me for fashion advice ever, nor will they. But you just loved him. So he and his buddy were driving. Buddy made some stupid driving mistakes. Sean was killed. The guy was hospitalized, but lived. Before the funeral, I'm standing in the back of church talking to Sean's dad, Mike. Now, Mike's a quiet man, an outdoorsman. He's a mountain of a man. When I hugged him, I felt like I disappeared. And we're back at church getting ready for the funeral and talking. And we both see the ambulance drive up the ramp in front. The kid had gotten a release to come, and they wheel him out and wheel him in the back, into the back of church. Mike goes, Father Joe, I got to go deal with this. Mike walks over to this kid and towers over his wheelchair, and I did not know what was going to happen. I held my breath. Here's what did happen. Mike gets down on his knees, he opens his arms, and he puts his arms around that kid, and they both sobbed in the back of church. I would say forgiveness seems almost impossible, but I've seen it with my own eyes. All right. we're pretty much on time. Before we go to the prayer for survivors of abuse, I'm aware that you have been seated for a long time and you're very patient. If it's not hard for you to do, would you be so kind as to stand up for just a second? And then, yep. And look around. If there's anybody near you that looks like they're nearly dozing off, would you just smack them for me? Just want to need a little help here to keep this going there. Okay. All right. I know you're thinking, will this guy ever stop talking? We're doing all right here, but feel free to go to the bathroom. Feel free to run out screaming. Shake your body, not your booty. Shake around a little bit. Okay. And when you're ready, have a seat, and we're going to go to section 5 of 6. So, I call this prayer, I have great worth and goodness. Sure. Duct tape?
Over your mouth?
Over my mouth? I still keep talking. Okay, so I did write a book on this subject of all of this. We're highlighting just some aspects of it. I put this prayer in the back as one of the appendix items. But I began each chapter with a quote. This is my favorite quote. It comes from the spiritual writer Anne Lamott. Anybody familiar with her? Now, I might not have all the details exactly of the story, but my memory was that Anne's a single mom, poor, right? Her daughter's in a competition with some supermodel rich kid with a supermodel rich mother, and the supermodel rich kid with a supermodel rich mother wins. Anne's reaction, and I love her honesty, was this quote, the category of words I never thought I'd see in one sentence. I thought such awful thoughts that I cannot even say them out loud because they would want to make Jesus drink gin straight out of the cat dish. She's aware. Too many have suffered terribly at the hands of others through physical or sexual abuse, and the harm is immeasurable. And yet there is a dignity in the human person that no one can take from us. I've long said this. If that's the Pope, tell him I'm being good. You're putting a good word for me. There's a little music in the background for this. If it doesn't play, let's just keep calling that number. No one can take away my dignity, and no one can take away my joy. People can make my life hellacious. They can't take away my dignity. They can't take away my joy. So this prayer, though it has the rhyme and meter of a child's prayer, I offered for people of every age, children of every age, and perhaps for the child in each of us. And it comes with my gut-felt heartache for all who have suffered abuse at the hands of another. It also comes with my deep admiration for your goodness and for your spirit, which were in no way diminished by what was done to you. And it goes like this. When someone has been wronged, dear God, it must make you so sad. You never want us to be harmed or made to think we're bad. Sometimes I feel mixed up inside, though I did nothing wrong. Please help me not to blame myself or think I don't belong. You think that I am precious, God. I'm always in your heart. No matter what was said or done, we never are apart. My goodness is not lessened by what was done to me. I have great worth and beauty, God, a loving dignity. Please help me to begin again and grow to be more free. Help me know I'm loved and good that you believe in me. The music will kind of clunk off quickly when I hit it. Sorry about that. A few quick things before our final parts. As I mentioned, I wrote a book about this. I always want to give this caveat. I don't make a penny off of any book I have ever written. I don't. Anything beyond expenses goes to help feed hungry people, a passion I got from my mom. I think all of my siblings did. The book was called Don't You Dare Forgive. Unless, guess where you got the title for this talk? The subtitle is Finding What You Most Deeply Want. Because sometimes we think, this is what I want. I want that person to suffer. Or as this one musician at my last parish said, he was hilarious. When I said something smart aleck, he goes, you'll have plenty of time to think that, to talk that over with the Prince of Darkness as you rot for all eternity. Is that what you really want? Maybe not. Okay. And that's what it looks like. You'd be happy to know my picture isn't on it. Okay. I mean, I address things like forgiving ourselves, the family wound, forgiving God. How do we know if we've forgiven? Whatever. I always feel like I'm not trying to sell stuff, but I did pre-sign a bunch of books with a generic message, but if you want me to personalize them, something like, Dear Mr. So-and-so, your son is still hoping you'd forgive him for what he did to the car last weekend. Your other son. I'd be happy to do that. Here's our parish information, sacredhearteureka.org, and that's our YouTube channel. At sacredhearteureka.org, we watch, and we have homilies by title and date, videos of them, and children's messages, and whatever, all that kind of stuff. And Big Al has a webpage. I wrote a bunch of books for kids. You can find that stuff for there. So this is, I don't need more to do. I kind of work 85 hours a week without all this kind of stuff. I still have in me another book. And I'm trying to get, and I like titles. So here's the title of my next book. It is. I do think it matters. Perfectionism. Are you good enough at it? And so, I come by it honestly. Here's a picture of me from several weeks ago. Ash Wednesday. And here is me. I'll read the caption. Here's me way too often. Me lying in bed at 4 a.m. realizing I should have said something else in an argument I had in 2012. If we had a show of hands, I bet I'm not the only one. And as a bonus, because, there's two more, I found a way to work in two more pearls before swines. Okay, there you have it. And then we'll have questions, comments, ridicule, a few thoughts about receiving forgiveness, the final thought, and a guided meditation. So this is about being a writer. I'm mostly a parish priest. That's my passion. That's my heart. But this first one is called Common Traits of All Great Writers. Common traits of all great writers. Naturally talented, hardworking, hard drinking. Rast having trouble coming up with any. He checks one. and concludes, I'm a third of the way there. Then later I ran across this chum. I don't know why these things cut me up. Today I will waste 7 hours. Then I will be productive for just 1 hour. Then I'll hate everything I did. Then I'll think I'm a joke. Then I will take out all my frustration on the person closest to me. How to be a writer, chapter 1. How appealing. He goes, when does the drinking start? So anyway, the process is not that bad. But it's not always that dissimilar. All right. So the final 4 things, we got a few minutes for questions, answers, comments, and ridicule. I grew up with one of 6 kids. My brother Dennis, whom I love dearly, is in the back. This is how we show affection. Then I'll do a little bit about receiving forgiveness. and a kind of a prelude to the sacrament of reconciliation, because some of us have really trouble receiving it. The final brief section called the choice, and then a brief guided meditation. So, questions, comments, ridicule, whatever. Yes, ma'am.
Father, a friend of mine told me that she forgave something that happened to her, but she can't forget.
Yeah. Could you hear what she said?
No.
It's a shame it was good. Next. A friend of mine said, a friend of yours said to you, she forgave you, but she'd never forget. I'll never forget I have a similar story. My deacon pastor, I sometimes played the guitar, and then he'd say, I don't want you to do that. So, but we had at Mass, okay, so we had a youth group prayer service in the church, and it wasn't a Mass, and I pull out the guitar for the Echo Our Father. Then he said, I told you never to do that. I'm sorry, I thought you said it wasn't a Mass. He goes, I forgive you, but I'll never forget. Nah, that's not forgiving. It's not.
It's not forgiving?
No, that's not forgiving. Now, if she's saying, I'm going to work hard to let it go, I don't want it to eat me up, I don't want you, then that's the work of forgiveness. But a statement like that sounds to me, now I wasn't there, but it sounds like a way of saying, I don't really forgive you. I'm saying the right words. That's what it sounded like to me when that priest said it. Thank you. Please.
I'm just curious, how important is in the act of forgiveness in letting the person know that you're forgiving them? Is that important?
Oh, good question. Please.
You didn't talk about if somebody asks you for forgiveness, does that matter? If they never ask you.
Great questions. Somebody else want to answer? Say your first part again.
So, if I forgive, to your point, I can feel better, right?
Yeah.
Me,
Yes.
but do I have to let the person know
Great question.
they're being forgiven? Because they may not even think they're wrong.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. You please listen to the guidance of the Holy Spirit for that, because situations are very different. Sometimes that person, it wouldn't even be safe to say something like that. Sometimes a person thinks they've done no wrong. If the person has asked for forgiveness, then I think it makes sense to say, I do forgive you. I still have some residual. I'm working on it. Pray for me, but I believe in you. I know that you are more than that moment or whatever. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Were you talking about that person next to you by any chance? Okay. God got me for making that smart aleck. Okay. And remind me your question again.
My question is, does the fact if somebody did ask you for forgiveness or if they're not even aware, does that matter at all?
What do you guys think? The fact that the person didn't ask for it, or might even be aware, does that matter? I think it can be a help if, like I said, the person is groveling. I mean, it just makes it easier for me, right? But whether or not... Get back in your corner, priest. Whether or not the person even comes to you for it, acknowledges it, it's still work I know I need to do. Does that make sense? Am I answering your question? When I first asked the group seemed to be along that same thing, so I'm drawing off of their energy. Great questions. Yes?
You describe forgiveness as a process. How do we know if we're doing this over and over again that we've really reached the point where we can let it go?
Oh, I love it. Jeez. Let me see. I hope this has a pointer. A laser pointer. That would be too cool. Okay. Can you see this red dot?
Yeah.
If you're a cat, try to catch it. Okay, so here's my definition of our wounds, and I'm going to ask your own answer to this in a second. Here's how I think our life wounds are like this, all right? And let's include, and in the middle it's all gunked up, but as we grow in freedom, the spiral opens, and we don't hit them as often, but we still hit them. So sometimes when we hit them again, we panic and think, I'm back at ground zero again. It's there all the way till eternity. My core wounds, I'm out here with them, but I still run into them. This makes more sense for a talk on perfectionism. I won't give you the example. It just distracts us from the moment. The fact that it's there in times of crisis, let me find the laser pointer again. In times of crises, the spiral tightens up again and it interfaces more. I think that we'll never be completely healed of all such things. Jesus, after he was raised from the dead, still had the marks in his hands and in his side, but he had no more power over him. I believe that's our gift in the life beyond what we can see. We keep working to become more free. I don't know that we're ever fully free now, but we know we're growing in freedom when all the fruits of the Spirit are there. I have more thankfulness. I'm less angry. I'm more grateful. Redundantly, he said redundantly. More joyful, hopeful. It makes sense. Please jump in, though. Add your thoughts.
So not thinking about it anymore?
It's a wonderful thing if it doesn't keep popping into your brain. Isn't it great? Yay.
And coming to some level of acceptance?
Yes.
It happened?
Yes.
But it's over?
Yeah. That's wonderful. And tell me if you agree with this, that just because it does sometimes pop into my brain again doesn't mean that I haven't really done the real work of forgiveness. But if it's not popping in my brain, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Good, thank you. Yes?
Do you believe that we have to get to the depth of our anger before we can truly forgive?
Wow. Do you believe we have to get to the depth of our anger before we can truly forgive? I am not trained enough to know that. Please offer your thoughts.
Yes, I do.
You believe you do?
Yeah, I think you have to get to that bottom line because I think unless you do, I think it's always with you. To really get to the point where and the anger is the anger of the righteous anger of, how dare you should have done this to me. And then once you can do that, you can start to let it go. That's my thought.
Mary said, once you get to that righteous anger of, how dare you do that to me, that was wrong. We need to go there as we can then start moving forward towards freedom. Is that a fair summary? Could ask me anything else and I'll turn it to one of these two. Yeah, that'd be great there. Please.
Doesn't that just kind of go against what you said, where you could just write the letters, light them on fire, and then eventually you'd be able to forgive? But she says, you really have to have that conversation with them.
Very good. I thank you. Great, good clarification. I don't think Mary was saying that you need to have that conversation with them. You just need to go to that place of anger inside of yourself that would lead you to writing a letter. You have to become aware of that power within, I think is what you were saying. Yep. Is that fair?
Yeah, you do not
Yeah, you do not have to deal with them. Yeah. And many times it is clearly advisable not to. Yeah. Good. You guys are really good. All right. A little bit about receiving forgiveness. Now, in the sacrament of reconciliation, confession marathon coming up, the process. Now, there's much that's funny about the second graders receiving first reconciliation. I mean, there's an insight that if you're not the priest, you don't get it, but assumption, they memorize this whole thing. They make the sign of the cross. And they said this so dang slowly, I am a second grade girl or boy, and this is my first reconciliation. And these are my sins. Okay, just kept going on and on. Okay. But sometimes they would forget, make the sign of the cross, they're excited to see me, and they look at me, and I go, I am a, and then they had it, right? Just get a little closer. Little girl comes in, gives me a high five, makes a sign of the cross. And she looks at me, I go, I am a, and she goes, a priest. And I go, you're right, and you're a second grade girl, aren't you? She says, I am. I go, good, what are you sorry about? So please, you do not need to worry about doing it just right. And if you say to the priest, Father Gary, tell me if I'm wrong, please help me, I kind of don't remember how to do this. If that priest doesn't coach you, then you got a bad priest for that sacrament, and I would think that, yeah. Well, I mean, really, I've never, I do apologize for any priest that was ever mean in a confessional if you ever had that. But even a crabby priest on a crabby day can't stop the love of God. But all the priests that I know, and the priests that Father Gary would invite, would want to help us with that. So what would I do if I went in there? There's various styles, but you don't have to be too nervous. But typically we make the sign of the cross, give the priest some background. It's been 30 years. There's zero shame, right? And I say, here's a thing or two I want to get off my chest. Here's an area or two I want to work on, right? We will never say anything to anybody. I will go to jail rather than say anything. Nor if I ever, and we don't usually remember, no offense to you. Well, Gary, it was you who once said, "You're not the star of my movie." Okay. But even, we just don't, but even, you're not going to shock us. My uncle, Father Wally Boole, was a priest. We had a picture of him saying Mass on the back of a Jeep in a battlefield in France in World War II. But he said, I'll give you guys $5 if you tell me something I haven't heard before. Well, I've said to people, I'll give you $500. Now, don't try to make up something. Okay, yeah. But you're not going to shock us. And even if we did remember, we would never bring it up again. So, Melba, how's that little problem with theft you were having? Okay. And what will we think of you? We will only have more love. I sometimes see something like, I remember having some affection, but you are coming, you had that red dot on the forehead moment that the prodigal son had, that what was I thinking moment coming to your senses. And you realize that there's a grace of a new beginning. And this sacrament, I believe, does offer that. We walk out not perfect, but forgiven with some grace for that new beginning. And there's a gift to root our shame in another person and to hear those words of absolution. And then sometimes people want to try to come back and say the same thing again. I know I've said this before. Stop. I won't. I said this the other day. I go, nope, you can't talk it again. Really? Nope. You said it before. He goes, really? Yep. He goes, oh, good. And he went, oh, okay, good. It's not all about us doing it right? But sometimes when we walk out, then we can't accept forgiveness. This is a whole nother talk. I said more about this, but I mean, yeah, Father, I still can't quit shaming myself for that abortion I had. Okay, how about this? When you get that feeling in your gut again, acknowledge it, there it is. Remember, God has forgiven me. And then be kind in that moment. That lady in front of you paying for her groceries with expired coupons from 1930, you just wish her the best, right? Or you're driving down the highway and that person next to you is driving like a moron, wave with all your fingers, right? Whatever, I mean, you let that moment of shame make you a more loving person. In the Catholic wisdom, every moment is as small as sacrament, a place to meet God, even our sin. So if you go out and you keep going back at it, remember you've been forgiven and love the person in the moment. All right. Anything else, Gary, you want to say about confession?
No, thanks.
You a fan? Okay. I'll end with this section and then a little guided meditation to end. Before that, anything else? You really are sweet human beings. At least the ones in the front are. That very back pew. So, you guys remember the ice bucket challenge? Yeah. At Assumption, I'll never forget this Friday afternoon, we gathered to do the ice bucket challenge in solidarity with a person named Joan who had ALS, right, Lou Gehrig's disease. And we prayed for all of them, and all of us were going to get buckets of ice dumped on us. Luckily, I was tall enough that the 8th graders couldn't get it over my head very much. I lucked out. And this young woman, 15 years younger than me, so she probably in her 50s, had run a half marathon less than a year before. ALS had already taken her voice. So she typed up a message. This is before the technology to record your own voice and things be spoken back in your own. But she typed up a message of thanks and held it close to the microphone, thanking everybody for this moment. And as she was doing that, I saw a vulnerable part of her I didn't usually see. And I saw simultaneously that spunky part of her which said, this does not define me. And I saw her husband over the corner looking, aware of the price of love, and it was hard not to sob. A few days later, I received a note from her thanking us for doing all of this. And since she had lost her voice already and she just had a new grandbaby, she said in part, when it hurts so much that my youngest granddaughter will never know my voice, I choose to be thankful that I can smile at her, hug her, hold her. I have to be happy with that now. And then she added, my mantra at this time in my life is, today I choose joy. That's what makes me happy. Today I choose joy. That's the choice we face. Suffering visits us all. Life is unfair. People can be mean. Heartaches will come. We pay a price. We try to remain loving and true. We all get angry, discouraged, all those things that Jesus felt. But in the end, a joy-filled life is a decision. I mean, it's not a once and done, of course. It's an ongoing decision we make again and again. As I said, the more we look for reasons for which to be grateful, the more we'll find them. It's a choice no one can make for us. All right, here's a guided prayer meditation to end. I'll hang around afterwards to whatever. Pretend like I'm nice, if you want to. And as I said, if anyone buys a book, I'm happy to write something in it an hour later, whatever. Okay, so during this little experience of prayer, I'm going to invite you to think of something, then I'm going to invite a little dialogue between you and God, okay? I know some people use imagination more readily than others, but give this a shot. So if you don't mind, I know you're like, God, this guy would never stop talking, but we're just about done. Try to become aware. Take a few good deep breaths, right? Become aware of having a body. It's a good thing to have. Everyone has things about our body we don't like, but it's a good thing to have. Good deep breaths. You got a body. Become aware of being alive. Become aware of being you. Now, in your imagination, I invite you to think of something that makes you a little bit angry. It doesn't have to be the worst thing, but maybe just below the surface. What's one of the things that pops up that still kind of makes you a bit mad? Some way you were treated poorly, whatever. So what I invite you to do is prepare to bring that to God. Like, what would you want to say to God about this thing, whether it was whatever it was? Again, it doesn't have to be the worst thing, but just whatever it is. I'll give you about 20 seconds to decide what you want to bring to God. Please don't be the perfectionist on this. Now I invite you, with words in your head or without words, just tell God what's on your heart about this tonight. Just bring it to God somehow. And now I'm going to do a dialogue. I'll speak some words that could be yours, maybe not. And I'll speak perhaps some words from God back to you. You say, It was so unfair, God. God says, it was. God, what happened to me was not okay. No, it was not. It hurts me that you suffered what you did. God, I know we're called to forgive. I don't know. I just don't know how. It's just so hard. I understand. Do you want to let it go? Well, God, part of me does, part of me doesn't. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to do it by yourself. You could give it to me. Would it be good if I helped you carry it? You decide what to do. I'll be here. Okay, God, here it is. As best as I can for now, I give this to you, at least most of it. I will carry this with you. And when it hurts again, offer it to me again. Okay, God, I'll try. I'll go with you to help you. Always, 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 I will be with you to help you. When you are ready, I invite you to come back to an awareness of being in this room here and now. If you were able to have a bit of a sense of that as prayer, try to keep a sense of the presence of God with you now. And I know that some people use more imagination more readily than others. If that was helpful for you, I'm glad. If it wasn't, or if you fell asleep, it's all right. It's still true. We don't have to do the work of letting go all by ourselves. Oops. Nice job on the music. Anyway, that's me. I want to get to my final slide. Thanks for being here. May God help us be people who dare to forgive. Thanks. Thank you.